In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, power is always a negotiation. You make binding vows, you burn cursed energy, you sacrifice your physical body or your sanity just to bend the rules of reality for a few seconds. If you want to level a city block, you need a domain, a barrier, and a bloodline stretching back 1,000 years. Everything has a cost. But what happens when the apocalypse doesn't care about your rules? What happens when the end of the world doesn't use cursed energy, doesn't make binding vows, and doesn't negotiate? If you live in the invincible universe, you already know the answer. Power isn't a magical transaction, it's strictly biological. Viltrumites don't need hand signs to break the sound barrier. They don't need a domain to crush a mountain. They're born as apex predators who completely ignore the laws of physics. They conquer planets because their DNA dictates that the weak must submit to the strong. Today, we're dropping Nolan Grayson, aka Omni-Man, directly into Tokyo, right at the front steps of Tokyo Metropolitan Cursed Technical College. By the time this is over, Satoru Gojo, the man who rewrote every rule in the universe, will be floating dead in space. And here's how that actually happens. Tengen's barriers have protected Jujutsu High for centuries, designed to detect every cursed thing that enters Japan. But Nolan Grayson is not a cursed thing. When he arrives in Earth's atmosphere, he isn't emitting an ounce of cursed energy. He isn't a curse. He isn't a sorcerer. He's just a highly dense, biological organism falling from orbit at Mach 10. Tengen's system doesn't register him, and that's because there's no cursed energy. It's just mass. Nolan hovers in the upper atmosphere, looking down at Japan. His mission is the same as always. Assess the planet's primary defense mechanisms, establish a benchhead, and prepare the population for Viltrumite assimilation. With his enhanced Viltrumite vision, he scans the Japanese landscape. He notices a facility hidden deep in the mountains outside Tokyo. It looks like a traditional temple, but it's heavily fortified, and his eyes pick up hundreds of armed teenagers and adults training in the courtyards. To a Viltrumite conqueror, a secluded military academy is the perfect place to strike first. You cut off the head of the planet's warrior class, and the civilians fall in line. Nolan folds his arms, angles his body downward, and drops. He doesn't use stealth. He hits the atmosphere so hard that friction turns the air around him into superheated plasma. He crashes through Tengen's barrier, covering Tokyo Jujutsu High. The barrier doesn't just break. The sheer kinetic force of his entry shatters the conceptual walls of the veil. The higher-ups look at their monitors, confused. The talismans don't register a curse. They don't register a sorcerer. They think a foreign military just dropped a bomb on them. The impact hits the central courtyard like a tactical nuke. The shockwave instantly vaporizes the stone training grounds, uproots ancient trees, and shatters every window within a 5-mile radius. A massive crater, 50 feet deep, replaces the courtyard. When the dust finally settles, Nolan Grayson slowly floats up from the center of the crater. He isn't wearing his red and white superhero suit. He's wearing Viltrumite military armor. He brushes a piece of ash off his shoulder. He isn't bleeding. He isn't even out of breath. He looks around at the terrified coughing students and teachers emerging from the rubble. Yuji Itadori, Megumi Fushiguro, and Nobara Kugisaki are the first ones on the scene. They were training just a few hundred yards away when the impact hit. Yuji spits dust out of his mouth, his eyes locked on the floating man in the crater. Is that a curse? Nobara asks. Megumi narrows his eyes, his hands already forming the sign for his divine dogs. I don't feel any cursed energy coming from him. Nothing at all. But a normal human can't survive a crater like that, let alone float in midair. Yuji doesn't wait for a full-blown analysis. He sees an enemy who just destroyed his school and potentially killed his classmates. He channels cursed energy into his legs, cracking the concrete beneath him, and launches himself directly at Nolan. Yuji is superhumanly strong even without cursed energy. With it, his punches can shatter buildings. He aims a cursed energy reinforced right hook straight at Nolan's jaw. Nolan doesn't dodge. He doesn't even shift his weight. He just watches the teenager fly at him. Yuji's fist connects. The impact creates a loud shockwave that kicks up another cloud of dust. Yuji expects the man's head to snap back. He expects to feel bone break. Instead, Yuji feels his own knuckle shatter. It feels like punching a solid wall of titanium at full speed. The bones in Yuji's hands splinter, and the cursed energy dissipates against Nolan's indestructible skin. Yuji's eyes widen in shock as he falls back to the ground, holding his broken hand. Nolan looks down at him, genuinely disappointed. You hit hard for a human, but you're still just human. Megumi acts instantly. He drops into his shadows and summons Nue, an electrical bird Shikigami. Nue dives from the sky, its wings crackling with cursed electricity, aiming its talons right at Nolan's eyes. But to a Viltrumite who can process information at light speed during interstellar travel, Nue looks like it's moving in slow motion. Nolan reaches out casually and grabs a giant bird by the throat. The cursed electricity surges through his arm, but Viltrumites routinely fall through solar flares and lightning storms. A few thousand volts of electricity doesn't even singe his arm hair. Nolan squeezes his hand. Nue's neck snaps instantly, and the Shikigami bursts into a cloud of black ink, destroyed. Megumi staggers backward, clutching his chest as the backlash of losing a Shikigami hits him. He's never seen anyone dismantle a 10 Shadows technique with raw strength. Nobara tries to set up a counterattack. She knows she can't fight him in close quarters. She pulls out her straw doll, ready to use resonance. The technique is lethal if she hits a piece of the enemy's body with her cursed nail. The damage transfers directly to their soul, ignoring physical durability. But there's a fatal flaw in her plan. She needs a piece of him. She needs hair, blood, or a severed limb. And Nolan isn't shouting anything. Before Nobara can even formulate a backup plan, Nolan pushes off the air. He breaks the sound barrier instantly, creating a sonic boom that blows out the eardrums of everyone standing nearby. He covers the distance in a second. He doesn't use a technique. He just backhands her. The force of a Viltrumite strike is catastrophic. Nobara doesn't even have time to reinforce her body with cursed energy. The backhand hits her chest, shattering her ribcage and sending her flying backwards through 3 concrete walls. She lies in the rubble, unconscious and critically injured. Yuji screams, his eyes bloodshot. He ignores his shattered right hand, channels every ounce of his remaining cursed energy into his left, and charges. He hits a black flash. The spatial distortion of the technique hits Nolan squarely in the chest. For the first time, Nolan actually feels a slight push. The black flash moves him backwards about 2 inches. Nolan looks down at his chest, intrigued by the strange energy that just sparked against his armor. He realizes these teenagers are using some kind of invisible kinetic projection. Interesting magic trick, Nolan says. His voice turns cold. My turn. He grabs Yuji by the throat, lifts him off the ground, and drives his fist into Yuji's stomach. He holds back so he doesn't punch straight through the boy, but the force is enough to rupture Yuji's internal organs instantly. Yuji coughs up a massive amount of blood and goes limp. Within 60 seconds of touching the ground, Omni-Man has dismantled 3 of Jujutsu High's most promising students without taking a single scratch. But what Nolan doesn't know just yet is that Jujutsu High keeps its real weapons in a different room. As Nolan drops Yuji's unconscious body into the dirt, Maki Zenin steps out of the dust. Maki is different. She doesn't have a drop of cursed energy. She has a heavenly restriction, trading all magical potential for a physical body enhanced to peak superhuman levels. She's faster, stronger, and more durable than almost anyone in Jujutsu society. She carries a split soul katana, a cursed tool that ignores the physical toughness of inorganic matter and flesh, cutting directly at the target's soul. Nolan looks at her. His Viltrumite senses pick up on her biology immediately. He can hear her heart beating at a more efficient rate. He sees the density of her muscles. You're different from the others, Nolan says, floating a few inches off the ground. You don't smell like that cheap energy they were using. You're actually built for war. Maki doesn't waste time talking. She knows she's outmatched in raw strength just by watching what he did to Yuji. She relies on speed and the unique properties of her sword. She vanishes from her spot, moving so fast that she doesn't make a sound. She appears directly behind Nolan, gripping the split soul katana with both hands, and swings it with everything she has, aiming right in the back of his neck. Nolan turns his head, intending to let the sword shatter against his skin, just like Yuji's fist did. But the split soul katana doesn't operate on physics. It targets the soul, and while Viltrumites have indestructible bodies, their souls aren't armored. The blade slices into the back of Nolan's neck. Nolan freezes. It doesn't cut all the way through. His dense muscle fibers still offer some physical resistance, and his raw speed allows him to pull away at the last second, but it draws blood. Not the kind of blood you wipe off your knuckles. Something deeper. Nolan touches the back of his neck. He feels a sharp pain that goes far beyond anything physical. It feels like a piece of his consciousness just got sliced in half. He looks at the blood on his fingers. He hasn't bled in decades. For a moment, he's completely still. He's not analyzing or recalculating. He's just standing there. The students watch from the rubble holding their breath. Maki grips the sword tighter, reading the opening, already setting her feet for a second swing. This is it. For the first time since he touched the ground, Omni-Man looks like something on this planet might actually be able to kill him. Maki swings again. Nolan's curiosity vanishes. Big mistake, he whispers. He catches the blade of the split soul katana between his bare palms. The blade burns his hands, cutting into his soul, but he grits his teeth and ignores the pain through sheer willpower. He twists his wrist and shatters the legendary cursed tool into metal fragments. Before Maki can even process that her weapon is gone, Nolan grabs her by the shoulder. He doesn't just hit her, he squeezes. He crushes her collarbone, shatters her shoulder blade, and throws her into the ground with enough kinetic force to trigger a localized earthquake. The ground craters beneath her. Maki's enhanced biology keeps her alive, but she's paralyzed from the impact. Nolan stands over her, wiping the blood off his neck. The cut is already starting to close, as his Viltrumite healing factor kicks in, but the soul damage lingers, leaving a dull ache in his spine. You have toys that can actually hurt, Nolan mutters, looking at the broken sword. Good to know. I won't hold back anymore. Maki Zenin was the closest thing Jujutsu Society had to a pure physical warrior. She drew blood. It wasn't enough. And the next 2 people walking through the dust don't fight with their bodies at all. Yuta Kotsu and Kinji Hikari arrive just as Maki goes down. Yuta's face goes pale when he sees his friends broken and bleeding on the ground. He immediately summons Rika, the Queen of Curses. The horrifying spirit materializes behind Yuta, shrieking violently at the sight of the alien invader. Hikari steps up next to Yuta, cracking his knuckles. I don't know what kind of curse technique this guy's running, Yuta, but I'm not feeling lucky today. Let's box him in. He doesn't hesitate. He claps his hands and instantly expands his domain, Idle Death Gamble. The barrier envelops all 3 of them. Nolan suddenly finds himself standing inside a brightly lit, loud pachinko parlor modeled after a romance manga. Music blares from invisible speakers. Holographic train doors slam shut around him. Nolan goes completely still. He's fought giant monsters, rebel armies, and interdimensional aliens, but he has never been trapped inside a psychic gambling simulator. He looks at the slot machines. He looks at the holographic commuters. He looks at the romance manga panels plastered across the ceiling like stained glass. The music does not stop. What is this? Nolan demands. A holographic projector? A telepathic assault? Hikari dances to the music, grinning. The sure hit effect of the domain streams the rules directly into Nolan's brain. Nolan suddenly understands exactly how the pachinko game works, and it annoys him in a way that getting punched never has. He doesn't care about hitting a jackpot. He just wants to kill the guy running the simulation. Nolan lunges at Kinji, moving faster than the domain's visual effect can track. He drives his fist through Hakari's stomach, obliterating his internal organs and blowing a massive hole out of his back. Nolan pulls his arm out, fully expecting the teenager to drop dead, but Kinji just laughs. The slot machines in the sky line up. up. 777s. Hikari hit a jackpot. For the next 4 minutes and 11 seconds, he has an infinite supply of cursed energy. His body automatically performs RCT at a subconscious level. Before Nolan's arm is even fully retracted, the massive hole in Hikari's stomach knits back together. The flesh, muscle, and organs regenerate instantly. Might be my lucky day, Hikari says, throwing a right hook covered in jagged cursed energy right into Nolan's face. The punch doesn't hurt Nolan, but the regeneration fascinates him. Nolan stands still while Hikari unloads a flurry of punches on him. He watches the way Hikari's body moves, analyzing the energy flow. He realizes Kinji isn't avoiding damage, he's just healing it instantly. You're using some kind of cellular regeneration, Nolan says calmly. It's fast, faster than mine, but it has to have a source. Yuta realizes Kinji isn't doing any actual damage. He draws his katana and joins the fight, remanifesting Rika. Rika lunges at Nolan, her jaws opening to bite his head off. Nolan turns, grabs Rika's upper and lower jaws with his bare hands, and rips the curse's mouth open. The strength of a Viltrumite overwhelms the cursed spirit. He tears Rika's jaw clean off, kicking her body away. Rika screeches in agony. Yuta uses a distraction. He channels a copy technique, Jacob's Ladder, aiming a column of blinding light right at Nolan. The technique is designed to extinguish cursed energy and nullify cursed techniques. The light hits Nolan directly. It bathes him in a purifying glow. Yuta pants, assuming he just stripped the invader of his powers. In the Jujutsu world, a sorcerer without cursed energy is just a fragile human. But Nolan walks out of the light, looking mildly irritated by the brightness. Jacob's Ladder didn't do anything because Nolan doesn't have any cursed energy to extinguish. His power is in his DNA. You can't turn off biology with a flashlight. Nolan flies forward, ignoring Yuta entirely, and grabs Kinji by the throat. Let's test the limits of your healing, Nolan says. Nolan doesn't try to punch Hikari to death. He knows the regeneration is too fast. Instead, he looks up at the sky. He bends his knees and launches himself straight up, carrying Kinji with him. They break through the barrier of his domain through force, shattering the parlor like glass. They break the sound barrier. They break the atmosphere. Within 5 seconds, Nolan flies Hikari into the freezing vacuum of deep space. Kinji's jackpot is still active. His body is trying to heal the damage from the freezing temperatures and the explosive decompression, but reverse curse technique requires oxygen and brain function to operate. It can rebuild lungs, but it can't magically create air in a vacuum. Kinji thrashes in Nolan's grip, his eyes bulging as he suffocates. His brain begins to die from oxygen deprivation. The RCT stutters, fails, and finally stops. Nolan watches the teenager's eyes roll back. Once he's sure the boy is dead, he lets go, leaving his frozen body to float in orbit. Nolan turns around and drops back down to Earth like a meteor, crashing right into the courtyard where Yuta is desperately trying to heal Maki and Megumi. Yuta looks up at him, stepping out of the crater. His strongest friend is dead. His copy techniques don't work. His curse is mangled. He realizes, with absolute dread, that they can't win. They don't have the tools to fight him. But before Nolan can finish Yuta off, the air temperature drops. The atmosphere feels heavy. A figure floats down from the sky, wearing a blindfold and a high-collared jacket. Satoru Gojo has arrived. 6 sorcerers have fought this thing. Not one of them has slowed him down. Satoru Gojo is the only person on this planet who has never lost a fight. This is the fight the entire universe holds its breath for. The strongest human sorcerer in history against an alien conqueror. Gojo lands softly on a piece of rubble. He lifts his blindfold slightly, his glowing blue six eyes analyzing Nolan. Gojo's brain processes cursed energy at an atomic level. He looks at Nolan and sees nothing. Nolan has no flow, he has no output, and he has no technique. It's like looking at a walking black hole. You've made quite a mess of my school, Gojo says. I'm going to have to ask you to leave permanently. Nolan looks at Gojo. He senses a different kind of confidence in this man. It isn't the desperate bravery of the students. It's the certainty of a man who knows he can't be touched. You're their leader, Nolan says. Good. If I kill you, the rest of this planet will surrender. Nolan doesn't waste time. He lunges at Gojo, aiming a punch that just killed an immortal teenager, intending to put his fist straight through Gojo's head. But the fist never lands. As Nolan's hand approaches Gojo's face, it slows down. The closer it gets, the slower it moves. Nolan pushes harder, flexing every muscle in his back and shoulder, applying enough kinetic force to derail a freight train, but he feels an impossible resistance. Gojo stands perfectly still, smiling coldly. You're fast, Gojo says. Really fast, but you're trying to cross infinity, and infinity doesn't have an end. Gojo's innate technique, Limitless, brings the concept of infinity into reality. Anything that approaches him is slowed down indefinitely by the infinite fractions of space between them. A Viltrumite can fly faster than the light in a vacuum, but even light speed can't cross an infinite distance. Nolan pulls his fist back, genuinely confused. He throws another punch, then a flurry of them. He moves so fast that his arms become a blur, but none of the strikes connect. They all stop mere millimeters from Gojo's skin. Gojo takes the offensive. He points 2 fingers at Nolan. Curse technique reversal. Red. A massive orb of repulsive energy blasts forward. It hits Nolan squarely in the chest. The force is catastrophic. It launches Nolan backwards through the entire campus, tearing up a trench in the dirt a mile long, leveling a nearby mountain peak before Nolan finally digs his boots into the ground and stops himself. Nolan wipes the dirt off his armor. He isn't injured. The kinetic push of Red is immense, but it's just physical force. Viltrumites can survive planetary explosions. A blast doesn't crack his ribs, but it pisses him off. Nolan flies back to Gojo in a fraction of a second. He realizes hand-to-hand combat is useless against the barrier. You have a shield that distorts space, Nolan says, floating a few feet away. Clever, but you still need to breathe. You still need gravity. Gojo realizes the danger immediately. His six eyes tells him that Nolan isn't generating cursed energy to formulate a to counterattack. Gojo knows he has to end this fast, before the alien decides to just destroy the tectonic plate they're standing on. Gojo raises his hand. He combines the force of blue and the force of red. Hollow purple, Gojo whispers. A massive orb of imaginary mass tears through the environment. It doesn't push or pull. It completely erases whatever it touches from existence. It moves at an incredible speed right towards Nolan. Nolan's instincts scream at him. He doesn't know what the purple light is, but his Viltrumite biology recognizes complete annihilation. He tries to dodge, flying upward at maximum speed. He's fast enough to avoid taking it to the chest, but the edge of the purple blast clips his left arm. The arm doesn't get crushed or burned. It just ceases to exist. From the elbow down, Nolan's arm is literally erased, leaving a clean cross-section where the limb used to be. Nolan looks at his missing arm in shock. Viltrumites can heal from disembowelment, but regrowing a missing limb takes months, if not years. He just permanently lost a piece of his body to a human. The pain hits him a second later, and with it comes a blind rage. Nolan realizes he can't just win a shootout with the guy who shoots black holes. He has to bypass the infinite shield. He remembers his training. He remembers the physics of his own body. Infinity filters objects based on mass, speed, and danger, but it doesn't filter out everything, or else Gojo wouldn't be able to breathe or hear. So it lets sound in, it lets air in. Nolan doesn't try to punch Gojo again. He flies backward, putting a mile of distance between them. He raises his remaining hand and his stump, drawing in a massive breath that expands his lungs to the limit. Then he claps his remaining hand against his chest piece. The impact creates a directed shockwave. It's a hyper-compressed wave of sound and air pressure moving at Mach 50. Because it's just air and sound, Gojo's automatic infinity filter doesn't register it as a solid threat quickly enough. The sonic boom hits Gojo. It doesn't crush his body, but the decibel level ruptures Gojo's eardrums, shattering his inner ear and concussing his brain. Gojo screams, clutching his bleeding ears, his equilibrium destroyed. Gojo's concentration slips for a fraction of a second, but that fraction is all Nolan needs. Before Gojo can use RCT to heal his brain, Nolan crosses a mile gap. He doesn't aim for Gojo's body, he aims for the ground. Nolan drives his hand deep into the bedrock beneath Gojo's feet. Using his strength, Nolan rips a massive chunk of the Earth's crust out of the ground. He flies upward, carrying the massive slab of rock, with Gojo still standing on it, straight up into the sky. Gojo uses RCT to heal his ears, realizing what's happening. He tries to cast his unlimited void. Domain expansion! Gojo shouts. The barrier forms around them, high in the upper atmosphere. Nolan is trapped inside the limitless void. Infinite information floods directly into Nolan's brain. The universe, the stars, every piece of knowledge in existence forces itself into his consciousness. A normal human brain fries in 0.2 seconds. A cursed spirit is paralyzed. Nolan freezes. His eyes go wide. He drops the slab of Earth. But a Viltrumite brain is not human. It's a biological supercomputer, designed to process anything without suffering an aneurysm. The infinite information hurts. It causes Nolan's nose and eyes to bleed as his atoms desperately repairs neural pathways as fast as they're burning out. He's stunned, but he isn't brain dead. Through sheer willpower, Nolan forces his remaining hand to move. He can't fight properly, but he can still fly. Still trapped in the domain, still suffering from the brain melting overload, Nolan grabs Gojo's ankle. Gojo is exhausted, panting from the strain of keeping the domain active. Nolan uses the last of his momentum to accelerate them both out in the atmosphere. They break into the vacuum of space. The sudden lack of oxygen, the extreme cold, and the explosive decompression hit Gojo simultaneously. Gojo's domain collapses immediately because he can't breathe to maintain the cursed energy output. Then Gojo tries to use infinity to keep the pressure around his body stable, but without oxygen, his brain starts to die. He tries to use RCT, but just like Kinji Hikari, he realizes you can't magically heal asphyxiation in a vacuum. Nolan floats in space, his brain slowly recovering from unlimited void, his eyes still bleeding. He looks at Gojo, both of them barely alive. The strongest sorcerer in history thrashes in the silent vacuum. Then he goes still. Gojo looks at the earth below him. He reaches out his hand towards it. Satoru Gojo dies in the cold void of space, defeated. Nolan drops Gojo's frozen body back towards Earth, watching it burn up on re-entry. He floats in orbit for a few minutes, his Viltrumite healing factor slowly repairing the neurological damage Gojo's domain inflicted. He's exhausted, missing an arm, and bleeding, but he's breathing steadily. He descends back to the ruined campus to finish the job. He expects to find Yuta and the others cowering. Instead, he finds the sky turning blood red. Standing in the center of the crater is Yuji Itadori, but the boy's body is covered in black tribal tattoos. His eyes are different. The overwhelming aura of malice radiating from him makes the air heavy. Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses, has taken full control of the vessel. And here's how this happens. Sukuna realizes that if Yuji dies permanently, he dies too. With Yuji near death and out of options, Sukuna offered a binding vow, a genuine agreement between two parties with equal bargaining power. If Sukuna uses his full strength to defend them both, he gets to take the body for a period of time. Yuji accepts because he's bleeding out in the rubble and he doesn't have a better idea. It's a deal with the devil, made willingly, with no other cards left to play. Sukuna looks up at Nolan floating down, and he doesn't look afraid. He looks wildly entertained. "You killed Satoru Gojo," Sukuna says, "and you don't even have an ounce of cursed energy. I don't know what kind of freak you are, but you're gonna make a beautiful corpse." Nolan doesn't waste breath on banter. He's tired. He dives at Sukuna, aiming to rip his head off. Sukuna smiles and swipes two fingers through the air. Dismantle. An invisible slash of cursed energy flies at Nolan. Nolan doesn't see it, but his instincts make him cross his arm over his chest. The slash hits his armor. It cuts through the dense Viltrumite metal and leaves a bleeding gash across his chest. Nolan stops midair, surprised. surprised. Gojo's attacks pushed him, but this actually cut his skin. Sukuna laughs. Oh, you're tough. That usually cuts people in half. Let's see how much you can take. Sukuna doesn't hold back. He immediately claps his hands together. Domain expansion. Malevolent Shrine. A grotesque shrine made of skulls and bones materializes behind Sukuna. Because it's an open barrier domain, it expands to a 200-meter radius, trapping Nolan inside. Everything within the radius is subjected to endless slashes, but Nolan doesn't have cursed energy. This creates a loophole in Sukuna's ultimate technique. Because Nolan registers as an object without cursed energy, the domain primarily hits him with the dismantle, not cleave. Thousands of invisible slashes rain down on Nolan simultaneously. It hurts. It hurts worse than anything Nolan has ever experienced. The slashes tear through his uniform, cutting into his skin, leaving thousands of lacerations all over his body. Blood pours from his arms, his chest, and his face. But his Viltrumite skin is dense. The slashes act like paper cuts on a rhino. They hurt, they bleed, but they don't cut deep enough to reach his vital organs or sever his muscles. Sukuna watches in horror as the alien simply stands in the middle of Malevolent Shrine, bleeding heavily but completely intact. What are you? Sukuna yells, losing his arrogant smirk for the first time in 1,000 years. He tries to manually aim a max Appa cleave directly at Nolan's neck. Nolan ignores the storm of slashes tearing at his flesh. He flies forward, taking the ultimate attack of the King of Curses. He reaches Sukuna in less than a second. Now, remember, this King of Curses is only 20% power. At this point in the timeline, the Shibuya incident hasn't even happened. Yuji is basically a noob. Nolan grabs Sukuna by the jaw with his remaining hand. He lifts the King of Curses off the ground. Sukuna tries to use his fire air technique, summoning a massive ball of cursed flames, but Nolan doesn't give him the chance to fire it. With one brutal sickening twist of his wrist, Nolan snaps Sukuna's neck, crushes his skull, and obliterates his brain. Malevolent Shrine instantly collapses into dust. The sky clears. The King of Curses, the most feared entity in Jujutsu history, dies in a matter of seconds, outmatched by the violence of a Viltrumite soldier. Miles away, standing on a high-rise building in Tokyo, Kenjaku watches the entire battle through his cursed spirits. Kenjaku has lived for 1,000 years. He has plans to orchestrate the Cullen Games. He engineered Yuji Itadori. He planned to merge humanity with Tengen to create an ultimate cursed entity. He accounted for Satoru Gojo. He accounted for Sukuna. He accounted for every possible variable in the world of Jujutsu, but he didn't account for aliens. Kenjaku watches his 1,000-year master plan burn to ashes in a single afternoon. He realizes that cursed energy, the foundation of his entire existence, is obsolete. The Cullen Games don't matter anymore. The merger doesn't matter anymore. Earth belongs to the Viltrum Empire now. Kenjaku turns away from the edge of the building, his face pale. For the first time in 10 centuries, the ancient mastermind feels genuine despair. He doesn't formulate a backup plan. He just walks into the shadows, knowing that there's nowhere on the planet he can hide from a being who can literally hear a heartbeat from orbit. Back at Jujutsu High, Nolan Grayson stands alone in the massive crater. He's bleeding from 1,000 cuts, missing an arm, and his uniform is completely destroyed, but he's breathing steadily. His Viltrumite healing factor is already starting to close the lacerations from Malevolent Shrine. The sorcerers of Jujutsu Kaisen spend centuries fighting each other, balancing the scales of power between the Gojo clan, the Zenin clan, and the cursed spirits. They built a world out of rules, binding vows, innate domains, ancient bloodlines, and convinced themselves those rules were the ceiling of what power could be. But the universe is infinitely larger than Japan. Nolan looks at the broken bodies of Yuji, Megami, Maki, and Yuta scattered across the rubble. He taps the communication device embedded behind his ear. This is Advanced Scout Nolan. Planet designated Earth has been assessed. The indigenous population possessed a localized energy weapon system. It caused minor damage, but the primary defenders have been eliminated. The planet is secure. Send the fleet for Viltrumite takeover.